Okay, right behind me here is a 1915 Harley-Davidson. And Alan Travis, to show us what it's all about, how it works, he's getting ready to get this thing on the road. And even though it hasn't been driven recently, he is going to show us what he does to get it going. We're going to hear and learn about the whole story on this motorcycle, why it's significant. We're going to learn a lot. I'm going to learn a lot, that's for sure. Come on along. Thank you. Okay, Alan, it looks like you have made some preparations here to get this motorcycle out. Tell us what this motorcycle is exactly and what are we going to do here?
Okay, well, this is a 1915 Silent Gray Fellow Harley-Davidson model 11F. This is not the earliest Harley in the world, but it really is a monumental point in Harley's manufacturing where all of the single-cylinder things came together, the belt drives came together, the two-speed and the single-speed transmissions basically became 3 speeds. It has suspension, front and rear. The suspension is on the seat in the rear. On the front, it's a rocking motion. So this was a real Harley. So this would, when people point to Harleys being, other than experimental, the 1915 Silent Gray Fellow was the ultimate expression of Harley, which that 1915 bike is the same bike that you'd buy today in 2024.
Okay.
You know, basically a 3-speed and 1,000cc V-twin 45-degree motor, chain drive. It's really, I know they have a belt today, but I mean, it's basically the same. So for 110 years, this configuration has lasted.
Wow, right. So prior to this, it was low production and very much kind of variation on trying to figure it out.
Yeah, every year was something different. They went the first 4 or 5 years. You know, they started in 1903. At least they say they started in 1903, but it wasn't really till 1907 or 8 before they really were into production for Harleys.
Okay.
And then they were single cylinders then. Their clutch was a long lever pushing pressure on a leather belt.
Okay.
They didn't have suspension yet, other than maybe in the seats. The V-twin came out, you know, 3 or 4 more years later than that, but still was a direct drive or single cylinder. I mean, a single speed.
I see.
So, you know, we're 1915 Silent Gray Fellow, they left the leather belts. They left the single speed transmissions. They left the 2-speed transmissions. They were into 3-speed. They were into V-twins.
Okay.
You know, it's really the configuration that we see today.
Kind of began the whole era, I guess.
Yeah, where it went from experimentals, you know, where you thought the motorcycle could make it, where in 1915, this bike could go 70 or 80 miles an hour in 1915.
Wow. And
was reliable enough on the oiling system and the fuel system that you could actually go a distance and know you're going to make it back. Mm-hmm. This is when they really started their heyday as far as really making a consumer item that people really wanted, and they made quite a few of them.
All right. So now this particular one, it looks like it's in very original condition or configuration for sure.
It's completely stock and original other than restored.
Okay.
So the gas tank is painted. You know, it was restored 20 years ago.
Right.
So it's an original bike that's been restored.
Back to original specs.
That's right.
Okay.
So there's a very valuable series of vehicles too that are original, but they wouldn't be as drivable maybe. This one is original and restored and mechanically restored. So it's got, you know, good bushings in it. You know, it's got, you know, nice pistons with nice rings on it, so it really will run right.
Right. So you're able to get this thing going and actually drive it down the road and enjoy it.
Yes, which is what we're going to show at the end of this video or by the next one at least.
Okay, very good. So now you haven't had this out on the road in a while.
Yeah, it's been probably 8 years, I figure. Okay. So there's things we're going to discuss on this video is how we're going to get it ready to start it.
Okay.
Okay, so the first issue is this is a total loss bike for the oil.
Okay, now you're not talking about investment.
Yeah.
You're talking about the oil. Okay.
Right. So the oil goes here.
Okay.
And then the oil, when you're using it, it meters into the engine and you can see through here the oil as you fill it up.
I do see a sight glass there.
That's the sight glass.
Okay.
So as you fill the oil tank, it goes in this sight glass and doesn't leak through, doesn't seep through.
Okay.
But in 8 years, it does seep through.
Okay.
So you would never take a bike that hasn't been started for a few years on a total loss and go ahead and just start it and see what happens. That's the worst thing you could possibly do.
Why is that?
Because that oil pump that directs 10 drops per second or 10 drops per minute to the main bearings on the right and the left side,
okay,
that's going to seep that oil through. In 8 years, your quart of oil in this tank would have probably gone through that oil tank.
Right.
So the first thing you do is you drain the oil out of the sump, out of the crankcase.
Okay.
Because the crankcase on a total loss bike has virtually no oil in it.
Okay.
You know, maybe that much oil in the bottom of the crankcase
Okay.
to splash maybe the wrist pins,
Okay.
but in general, not much more than that.
Okay.
So on this side of the bike, you can see what I did a half an hour ago.
Okay.
I took this drain plug loose, and I drained this much oil out of the crankcase.
Wow. You have basically a full liter right there.
Yep.
A quart.
So, and that's what this tank holds, is basically a liter.
Okay.
So 100% of that oil in that 8 years
It's just gone.
did go through into the crankcase.
Yeah.
And then even though you might think it'd be good lubrication, not any of that oil is going to go into the main bearings on either side.
Okay.
You know, maybe some would splash there, but it's not going to go in the center of the bearing.
How is it normally getting to the center of the bearing?
Well, it's going to go through the tubes that are from this oil tank,
Okay.
and it's metered into the top of those two bearings.
Okay. That's
So
how it's supposed to get
That's
there.
how it's supposed to get there.
Okay.
Not by splashing and sloshing by the motion of the crank pins
Right.
or the rods.
Okay.
So even though it had that much oil in it, you
Yeah.
could still starve the engine
Wow.
with oil. And you could hydrolock it too from the bottom side, because it may not even have much of an oil suppression ring anyway.
Right.
So if you had a quart of oil in that tank and it's not intended for it, you'd have a giant oil pump that you'd hydrolock the engine with oil pretty darn quick.
Oh, wow.
So so it was really good to drain that oil and find out that it was full of oil.
So is there a dipstick for checking the oil level?
No, there isn't a dipstick.
Okay.
So you just have to know to do that.
Okay.
So if you ever find one of these on the side of the road or in the middle of the desert,
Or in the barn somewhere.
or in the barn, don't just try to start it.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and fill the gas tank. Now this oil maybe has never been used before. So if I strained this oil, I could probably put it back in the oil tank.
Yeah, it's probably really good.
So,
Like, it looks pretty clear, actually. Not
it
bad at
does.
all.
So
Okay.
right now, since I haven't strained it yet,
Okay.
I'm not going to use it.
Okay.
But I'll probably strain it, put it back in the oil container that we're going to pour into the oil tank.
Sure. Okay.
So I'll put it over here.
You're a good man recycling that oil.
That's right.
I like it.
So now we're going to go ahead and put oil in it.
Okay.
And then I'm going to put oil in up here. And if you'd go down there, you can maybe see a telltale of the oil going through. And all you're going to see, you might see a wetting of that. You might not see much more than that, because the dispenser isn't spinning right now. So you still might only see a drop go by that. But when it's running, you'll actually see oil flow past it.
Yeah.
But just watch there for a minute.
I do see it.
You do?
Yep.
Okay.
We saw just a drip kind of slide along the side.
All right.
There.
Well, that drip when it's running will be a drip every 5 seconds or so.
Okay.
So now we're assured it has oil, and we're assured that at least the dispensing device on the actual motor is working.
Okay.
So at least it's going by. No, it's not spinning because the engine isn't spinning.
Sure.
But it's in all likelihood it's going to work now.
Oh, let's just take a quick little oil tank. Well, looks like it's is that galvanized metal, I guess, or something. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, now gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 gas tanks.
Okay.
So this gas tank, which looks like one piece, is actually 2 halves.
Okay.
So in this half of the gas tank, it's got oil and a valve to pump the oil.
Oh, that's what that is. Do you create oil pressure? I guess you create oil pressure pumping that. Do you have? How often do you have to do that?
Just when you start it. Now look down there again.
Okay.
Anything happening?
It looks like the level's up a little bit. I don't see anything actually taking place.
Okay, well, it still may not.
Yeah.
Because I'm drawing air and I'm pushing, but I'm pushing this directly into the motor right now.
Okay.
So now I have, it was easy to push initially,
Yeah.
and now it's hard to push. So now I know that I have oil where it's supposed to go.
Okay, so is that, okay, so we're seeing oiling lines here.
Right.
Going with a nice little curly cube, probably to manage vibration or something, I'm guessing?
Maybe, but that's going probably another tributary into the mains also.
Okay.
So before we start it, we're forcing it through, and by forcing it through, it might also bleed the other side a little bit because we're upsetting the pressure in the tank. We're upsetting the pressure in the crankcase.
Yeah. So
we might even be releasing the bottom of that. So we have primed it with this oil.
Okay.
And then we know that our dispensing device has got oil. So now we're going to put gas in the tank.
Okay.
So we'll put gas in this side.
Okay, and there is probably the reserved side, I'm guessing.
Right. So this side holds a gallon or 2.
Okay, yep.
Because it's a full gas tank. This side holds probably a half a gallon.
Sure.
So we're just going to put some in this side.
Okay. Okay, got some gas in there. Oh, look at that. We see some liquid.
Yep. They're not supposed to be leaking.
Need to find out what the deal is there, though, the filter.
Yep, so I tighten that.
Okay. Pause.
Here it shows we're draining our leaking gas tank, but this is the valve for the gas tank.
Okay.
So if I open this valve up, then we see the flow.
All right. Sure enough.
So we could, in the situation where it's leaking like it was, we could have just turned the gas off, but we can't, it won't run.
Right.
So that's the O-ring that's not doing its job.
I see. Need a new one, huh?
Yep. So I'll put a new one on.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and finish draining the gas tank.
Sure.
So you have the main tank fuel you can turn on and off, and you have the reserve tank you can turn on and off.
Right. But either one still goes through this spot, so it's not going to help.
No, there's another one of these on the other side for the reserve too.
Okay.
But we only filled this side.
Right.
And since we have a leak because it's dripping, we have to fix it anyway. So we'll just drain it.
So you're going to put gas on the other side and check it at the same time?
No, because the T connection will allow it to still probably go up and leak out. So I don't, just like an airplane, airplanes don't crash because of one problem. They crash because of 4 or 5 problems.
Okay.
So we'll fix each thing correctly. We'll be empty of gas in a minute.
Very good. Yeah.
Now, we have drained the tank that we filled because we need to put a new O-ring in that, but we'll continue with the fuel system anyway.
Sure. Okay.
So the fuel goes down through the filter here of the one that we just showed the valve.
Right.
And then it fills up this fuel filter, which is a modern fuel filter, and goes up to the carburetor. So right now, with what's shown in the fuel filter, will this bike run?
I think so.
No, it won't run.
It won't.
Because this fuel filter, this is all gravity feed. So there's nothing pressurizing the fuel to make it go up this loop and go into the carburetor.
Oh, so it has to be up this high to do it.
Right. So even though there's fuel in here, it won't run. So the only time this bike would ever run is if this fuel filter had no air in it whatsoever.
I see.
Because the gasoline must be up at least to this point.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking of a more modern car.
Yeah, no fuel pump. It's gravity feed.
Sure.
Which is
okay.
Okay. Now, to continue on, if we were going to start it now, see these brass things on the side?
Yeah.
Those are the same things as what you've seen and what we've done in the other videos for the other 10 or 15 early brass cars. These are primers.
Okay.
So the way these operate, you open the primers up, and then this is full of gasoline.
Okay.
And you hit this with a couple squirts of fuel.
Okay.
Okay? Both of them.
Okay.
So then you have fuel primed into the cylinder. So now, even if there was no gas in the carburetor at all, it would start for a second or two on what's in the prime.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay? So you would prime it if it's real cold outside, or really cold, you haven't started it for a long time, there might not be any fuel in the carburetor. By priming it, it'll actually start firing and then draw the fuel from the float bowl in the carburetor.
I see.
So the primer is a nice thing to have, but you have to have something at your home base to keep with you to fill your primer up, because it's kind of an odd thing to fill otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know how else you do it, really. Okay, that's interesting.
Okay.
Now, what else you do to get this thing ready to go?
All right. So we've discussed the oil.
Yep.
And now we know we have oil in it and we don't have too much in the crankcase.
Okay.
The next thing you do, you check your clutch. This has got a 3-speed transmission.
Right.
The 3-speed is on the tank. So you have low, neutral, second, and high. And it's a pedal start bike. So the way you start it is you pedal it to get it going. Or you can kickstart it to get it going. So you can kickstart it by just pushing through if you want. So right now I'm not engaged in the motor.
Okay.
But I could also go and pedal it to start it. But right now the engine is disconnected because the clutch is open.
Right. Okay.
So this is a hand clutch and this is a foot clutch.
Interesting.
So if I engage the clutch, I can now...
Okay, you can hear the compression, yeah.
Right, I can start it that way.
Okay.
So why does this have a foot clutch and a hand clutch?
I hope you're going to tell me.
Yep. So what if you're on your way somewhere and you're stopping at a red light, if they had that then, or a stop sign, or you had a train?
Okay. Right.
Okay. And then if you have the clutch pushed in because you're waiting for the train and you're in first gear, you can't, and you're at an incline, you can't pull your feet up from the ground and push on the clutch lever, you'll fall over.
Right. You got to have a way to balance the bike.
So what you would do is, then at that point you'd use the hand clutch, engage your clutch at first gear with your feet firmly on the ground, and then you can take off nicely and go up over the train tracks and you're on your way again.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's a way to start on a hill.
Got you.
So normally you don't use the hand clutch, you use the foot clutch.
Right.
So your heel opens it up, releases the clutch, and your toes engage it.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
Wow.
It's also got a suspension seat, which we'll show in the manual in a little while.
Okay.
The suspension, you set it for your weight.
Okay.
So say I weigh 190 pounds. I'm going to move it down 3 inches maybe, and that's too much. Maybe I want to adjust the nut between the two springs inside the seat post so it only goes down 1.5 inches with my weight, and then it's set for the up and down motion, and that's your whole rear suspension is basically the seat post. You have a little bit on the back of the seat too, but your real suspension is not on the bike, it's on the seat post. Okay. And as you video here, you can see it move up and down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is set for about 190 pounds right now.
Okay.
And that's about right.
Okay, good. Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing is you need to be able to kill it. It's got 2 ways to kill it. Okay. This is a kill switch. So it isn't a starter switch, But what this does is, this allows you to short the mag so it's not going to run anymore. You can also, which we'll show in starting it, when you start the bike, in fact, I will show you. We don't have the fuel turned on because we have a gas leak right now.
Right.
But right now, if I have the clutch pressed in, which it is, and I try to pedal it, it's hard to pedal.
Yeah, apparently.
Okay, so now I'm going to retard the timing, i.e. retard the magneto. And in doing so, it also makes the compression release. So it opens up the exhaust valve, opens up the valve just a little bit, so you can pedal it.
Wow.
So now you can pedal it easier. So this handle over here retards the timing and makes the compression release open. And then as you start to pedal it and it's going, and you're sucking some fuel in the carburetor, then you release the pressure on the compression release, which advances the timing slightly, and it should start.
That's wild how it does all that.
Yep.
Just with the...
And then this one is your throttle.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
So you throttle on this side, compression release and magneto on this side. All the early cars had their magneto and their throttle on the steering column. Well, this is your steering column in a different way.
Yep.
So that's how you would do that.
So, quick question. We talked about starting it. Will you still adjust the timing somewhat while you're driving?
No, I'll simply advance it.
Okay.
It's only moving 15 degrees.
Okay. So once you're going, you're not going to worry about that anymore.
Right. Okay. And also, if you didn't have a compression release on the bike, you'd still retard it. Say it was a single-cylinder Harley, which is half the size of a V-twin 1,000 cc's. But still, if you had the timing advanced too far, as you were pedaling through, it could kick you back off.
I see. Okay.
So by retarding the timing at the low RPM, i.e. you're starting it, it won't do that to you.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
But once it's started, you can have full advance.
Got it. Okay.
And once you've got it started, you certainly don't want to have a compression release. You don't want to have anything that keeps the valves open a little bit. You want to have the valves operate like they normally
nice and tight.
operate.
Okay.
The next thing when you start an engine like this, and we've already done it, is you want to oil your rockers.
Wow.
And these are your intake. Your carburetor is on the other side here.
Yeah, there it is.
And that's the intake manifold. So this is the intake valve. So the intake valve is external. And the way you lubricate your intake valve, you simply put a little bit of oil in that opening and then close it back up again. And do this one. And close it back up again.
Gotcha.
And then these are your exhaust valves, and your exhaust valves are shielded. So you're not...
Yeah, and they're plenty hot, and they don't need to be...
There's no lubrication really for them too much.
Okay.
And then also in the transmission, it's a 3-speed transmission. On the early bikes, they were separate. This is the transmission, this is the motor. So the transmission, you oil it by putting a little oil right here.
Okay.
And then there's another one like right here.
Gotcha.
And that's just for your levers. And then your transmission oil fills up right here. Yep. And the transmission has about the same weight oil as the motor does. And this is refilled at this point. And the bottom of the gears basically are dancing inside of that oil, which lubricates it.
Okay.
It's straight cut gears, but they're pretty quiet.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
On your brakes, this is your brake. Your brakes are not on the front. You only have rear wheel brakes.
Okay.
But that's all they had for another 15 years or so.
Of course, a lot of cars only had rear brakes then,
that's
too,
right. It wasn't until about 1930-ish that pretty much all cars had four-wheel brakes. And bikes were something in the same area. Each brand was different. But, but the first years of bikes didn't have front brakes.
Sure. Okay. Good to know. Yeah. 100%.
And this is your headlights.
Yeah.
This is your Prestolite tank, which is acetylene basically.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a carbide light. So if this had the carbide generator, i.e. the same kind of configuration as the Prestolite tank, it'd be carbide pellets and water, and as they would mix, as the water would drip on the carbide pellets, it generate acetylene gas, which
Right.
makes the light run.
Mm-hmm.
This was a very valuable vehicle to have 109 years ago, and you didn't want to leave this outside for 6 hours if you got home at night. Because if you had a carbide generator on the bike somewhere, you couldn't put it inside your carriage house because no matter what, it would be continually generating acetylene gas.
Sure.
So because you wanted some security with your motorcycle,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people put the Prestolite tank on, i.e. the acetylene tank on it, so when you got home, you could simply turn off the tank.
Oh, really? There's a switch back here?
Yeah, there's a lever, you turn it off.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And right now, you can read how much Prestolite we have, how much acetylene we have. We don't have any in it right now, so we can't go for a night ride tonight.
Okay, we can't turn the light on until you fill up the
Unless I
tank.
use my acetylene tank over there in my welder, and I put a little bit in there. And I can.
Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Prestolite. Very cool. All right.
Okay, and then this is your front suspension. It's a rocker suspension. So you see as you move up and down,
Yeah. Okay, there it is.
you see how it
moving.
moves.
Yep.
And then the way you lubricate it is, we've just done this, you
Yep.
put your grease in here, not oil,
Okay.
and you put the grease cap on, and you just push it until it gets pretty tight,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're pushing grease into your bushings.
Yeah.
So that's a good amount.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that covers it quite well. Oil, gas, is there anything to do with the spark on
No,
this?
because your timing advance, you're either going to have it retarded to start, or you're going to simply advance it for run.
Is there an
Then
on-off switch for the electric, for the magneto, other than
Well,
the handlebar?
there is their kill switch,
Okay.
but you can also kill it by retarding the timing, i.e. and opening up the valve for the
Okay.
compression release. That'll pretty much kill the engine too.
Sure. Okay, but there's not an electrical switch or an electrical
No,
key
not really.
or anything
You
like
have a
that.
kill switch, which is momentary,
Yep.
and then you have the compression release, i.e. retard the timing, which will also kill it.
Right.
Plus
and then you
also-
have the fuel valve off on.
They'll take a while before it stopped running.
Ah, right. Okay, gotcha.
But you could still turn that off, but I think you'd still have 5 minutes of it running.
Oh, really? Okay.
So if you were scared of what the bike is going to do to you, you hit your kill switch
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
and if that was still operating, which it always should be, it's simply a wire to ground.
Yeah.
And then secondarily, you'd hit the compression release, so it was opening up the valves,
Okay.
so they weren't making compression anymore.
Yeah. So it's not going to go anywhere.
It's not going to go.
Yeah.
And then you could turn your gas off.
Gotcha. All
That's
right.
it.
Well, this is a great primer, you might say, to what we're going to do with this motorcycle and get it running. I assume for people watching this video, we'll be next edit point or next video, we're going to have this thing underway, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay, Alan, thanks so much for sharing this very beautiful, unique, and impressive Harley-Davidson from 1915. Really incredible. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see
and
it.
then the idle speed jet is that bottom little thing in the corner,
Yeah, I see that.
which I'll point to, which is this thing right here.
Yeah.
And then that's a screw on the side.
Hmm.
You can thread that to make it idle fast
Yeah.
and idle
Okay.
slow.
Interesting.
And this gets more air in the carburetor and the plenum, like the Stevens Duryea.
Okay.
But this jet is interesting because as you give it gas, it moves it in and out.
Yeah, it's pivoting. Right.
So it's got one jet. So that means in that position, your fire hose jet is controlling the fuel in the idle circuit.
Got it.
Neat.
Yeah.
And as you accelerate, it opens up into your high speed, the same jet, but it opens up more and more and more.
Interesting.
And it both logarithm. This thing right here, this thing here,
Yeah.
There's a screw on this end
Yeah.
and a screw on this end, and this is a roller on it. So I can tighten up the idle side
Uh-huh.
or the high speed side.
Okay.
So it either ramps up, opens it more at high speed, or ramps down at high speed. Same thing for idle.
Huh.
So that's how much adjustability you have. And that's probably never been conceived before. That's why this is considered to be an automatic carburetor.
Huh. Now, when was this carburetor designed? Is this the first year?
Schebler made carburetors before this.
Okay.
This was the H was, I think 1914 was the first year of this one.
Okay.
Might be wrong on that, but it's really close.
Something like that.
I have Schebler carburetors from the teens, and 14 on this on the model
right,
H.
Yeah. Very unique tools. Nice. Time to get this thing started. So that you have gasoline in that pumper can,
Yep.
huh? Okay.
And this is for priming.
Okay.
And we already showed in the first part of the video, we can flood the carburetor.
Yep.
So if we're stopping at a light, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to do it a different way because that's another way to start it,
Okay.
by priming it. And all antique cars have primers on their heads. So does this. So we're going to spray a little gas there
Okay.
and spray a little gas in there. So now in the combustion chamber, we have a combustible mix.
Okay.
So now we don't have to worry about is the gas there or not. The next thing you do is your throttle. In this, there's no throttle return springs in 110-year-old bikes.
Okay.
So when you start it, you need about half throttle. But just remember, you've got to turn this because it might be spinning more RPM than it can handle. So you turn it off.
Okay.
And if you turn it off, it'll be off. Or if you turn it maximum throttle, it'll be 4,000 or 5,000 RPM,
Wow.
which you'll have a bomb.
Yeah.
So be ready to turn that off.
Okay.
You also, before you start an antique motorcycle, you put Gauntlet gloves on, even if you're not planning to ride it. Why? There's no on-off switch. There's no key in a bike this old.
Right.
So the only kill switch you have is by hitting this to here. That's your kill switch.
Okay, and that's grounding the magneto, right?
Right.
Okay.
And if you have no glove on and you're scared anyway, or you have some gas or sweat, and you're holding on to this and you touch this at the same time, you're going to be really shocked,
Yeah. Wow.
alarmed.
And maybe not happy.
So you want to have a glove on, so if you are going to hit the kill switch, you can hold that thing on.
Okay.
So right now it looks perfect. Why would you do that? Because you have this perfect little insulated button on the top. The problem is this is a Harley-Davidson.
Yeah.
It vibrates all over the place. If it's revving up really high, you don't know what's happening.
Right.
And this little arm might be broken off.
Right.
And then you're grabbing a hold of this thing.
Right.
So just always have your Gauntlet gloves on.
Very good.
Okay, we have primed it.
Yep.
And then we're not going to use the compression release
Okay.
because this time we're going to try to start it with a kickstart part of the pedal.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm going to turn the choke on. So now it's choked.
Okay.
So it's been 8 years since we started the bike.
Yeah.
And so 8 years and 5 seconds worth of starting, it's running.
That sounds great. That sounds really great. works. Nice. Wonderful.